Don't shush me. It's the same story after like all this time. We're always left scrambling. Dude, seriously?
Welcome to Mondays with Tara and Andre. We'll be with you in just a second for the 7 must-haves for open relationship success.
Yay.
Hey, Andre.
Hey, Tara.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mondays with Tara and Andre. Today's topic is the 7 must-haves for open relationship success.
Yeah.
So we'd love to know in the comments if you can see us and hear us. That would be awesome.
Speaking of CS, how do you do it? So like I see like this big shadow on half my face, which, I'm sure our viewers are happy about. They don't see all of it. But you always have this light that comes from you. It's like, how is that possible?
I forgot the ring light today.
No, but even at that, you look like you're well lit and glamorous, and I'm just,
if I
hiding
move
in the
back,
cave.
can you see? Oh.
No, but the light comes from the other source. Anyway, here we are.
Is that better?
It doesn't matter. It's just, it's an interesting observation.
Well, welcome. Oh, I can see people saying hello. So hello, everyone. Glad you can hear and see us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super excited about today's topic for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, you sure are. What's going on? Tell me.
Well, today we're actually going through the 7 must-haves, as we said, for open relationship success, which is hard to say.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm excited about it is because this is probably the first time we've put together in one episode all the things that are part of our open relationship and polyamory mastery group program. And the reason that's extra exciting is because we've opened the doors again for it to start our next cohort, because we're just finishing up our last one. And it was really amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm super excited about the results the people had that were in it, where they started and where they've ended up. And we still have a couple more weeks, which is great. And then also like all the amazing stuff we put in the program, which are all the 7 things that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's interesting because before we started and we were looking at the notes, you said, wow, it's amazing to have all this brought together in one place. We didn't have that when we first started and we were looking at things like this. So it is a great resource, right, to have that all put together like that.
Yeah, I think what happens sometimes, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is if you're opening up a relationship, you have to sort of piece together things from various sources and kind of flail about making the mistakes and all that stuff. And while there's groups like this around, I think the difficulty that people have sometimes is actually taking that information, that free information that's online, and translating it and applying it to your personal circumstances.
Right.
Oh, Kitty is saying that we look fabulous and they can hear us. Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. So it's May and spring. Yeah. I don't know where it's like where you are, but it's pretty rainy here today.
Well, it's the end of April, beginning of May. Maybe we're just a little bit late here. April showers, but it's all good.
Yeah.
It's weather.
Well, I went for a good walk today and saw all the flowers blooming, which is always exciting. So with flowers blooming also, I think, people get excited again for getting out into the world and meeting people and that sort of thing. So some people may have put their open relationship on a bit of a pause over the winter. So I'm curious if that applies to any of you, and if now you're anticipating action with spring. So
coming out of the cave like a bear, right, and hungry for it, and now ready for it, and here comes the spring. Let's do it.
Yeah. And I think it's also a good time to start off the spring with doing your relationship review through what we've adapted the multi-amory model of radar to be radar, which we will talk about a bit later. So I'm curious if people are excited about spring and what's coming up. So drop your answer in the chat and let us know what you love about spring and if spring brings excitement of new relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting. The beginning of the year, January, starts in winter. But for me, the spring is the beginning of the year, right? So in some cultures, they delay the beginning of the year, delay it, or they appropriately announce the beginning of the year in the spring. So what are the New Year's resolutions that might be carried forward to the beginning of spring? What am I wanting out of life this year? What am I wanting out of my relationship?
Yeah.
Interesting to ask.
Well, it's also, if you did make some New Year's resolutions associated with your relationship or yourself, it's probably a good time to review those to see if you're actually getting closer to those goals. So spring review, excitement, lots of things.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? Because you might have made these resolutions with all earnestness, and that's wonderful. But have you stayed the course? Where are you now? And are you hitting those milestones and objectives towards your goals?
Yeah. So if your goals have to do with opening a relationship and feeling secure and satisfied in it, then this is the perfect thing for you today. Because today we're going to go over the 7 must-haves, which are the exact 7 steps that are part of our securely polyamorous framework that are in our group program, Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery, which, as we said, is starting again soon. So if you want to know about that, let us know.
Isn't there a sheet also, a worksheet?
There's a worksheet. So stay to the end and we will give you the secret word to get the worksheet to work through all 7 things, or at least get started on them. I don't think you're going to work through them on a worksheet, but it's a good way of getting some thoughts together. So
awesome.
So a question for those in the audience watching either, let us know if you're watching live, #live, or in the replay, #replay. But for anyone who's watching, we'd love to know from you, what would you need to change in your relationships to feel like you could open it or remain open in a way that feels secure and satisfying?
So if you've not yet opened it, what could you do to make it feel secure and satisfying? And if you've already opened it, how can you increase that level of security? What bugs might there be?
Yeah, the things they need to change.
All right, good.
So are the things we need to change?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily change or review and modify or confirm. So I think that communication, for example, right? It's what we say is the cornerstone of open relating, is that we be transparent in our thoughts and our feelings and as much as possible, and that we communicate. So what is our level of communication? And do we ever find ourselves falling back to old patterns, right? So,
like just before this broadcast.
Well, okay, that's always a good one, right? So, maybe we're feeling a little excitement, some tension, anxiety, whatever it is. And do we maintain our good, helpful approach in communicating, or do we revert back to those old patterns? And when we do revert back to them, should we revert back to them? Can we become aware of it and then course correct them and say, you know what? Maybe that's not the best way of doing it. Let me take a step back, take a pause, reflect, and then make another offering. Yeah. And in that also, being the recipient, if I have a miscommunication, are you willing and able to acknowledge that also with an open heart and then let it go so we can, press that reset at any time, right? So are we bringing forward all that hurt and anger from the past, or are we able to say, you know what, the person is coming at me with an open heart. Let me walk through this a little bit looser, right? Let me step through it lighter. And it's not only to release the other person from the bind, but ourselves from it, that we can be free of having that kind of resentment. So really, it's the idea of being able to invite ourselves and our friends to reset that and be acknowledging of it. It's working towards something, always trying to acknowledge what we've done well, but what we could do better if possible, but from an open heart. Phew, that's a lot.
Oh, I'm feeling a little emotional. I think that I've been not the best communicator lately, so I want to apologize to you for that.
No worries, and I appreciate your being able to reflect that way and come up with whatever estimation you feel. I think that you do a wonderful job, and like I said, myself as well. We can always be better communicators. We can always be more charitable, more generous, more Christian, as they say.
More Christian. Well, I
or
think
more
that
Jewish, more Muslim,
you tend
whatever.
to be very generous with me and my patterns. And I have been noticing some certain patterns in myself that I've been journaling about.
Aww. Well, you've been very generous with me as well. So, I think that is one of the things about generosity, hopefully, is that the more you give, the more you're open to receiving as well, because you get that. But we don't do that for that reason. We're not generous because we think it's going to come back. But there's some kind of law of karma that seems to, for me, that when I give, I feel that it's good for me, but also maybe it invites the other person to be charitable in that way as well. So it's good. Just good invitation, reminders for ourselves to gently look at these things and see how we can always go towards the light.
Go towards the light. Well, thank
Not
you.
the big light, but the light.
Not the big light.
Not the
No,
big-
we don't want to head towards the big light yet.
Not yet. No rush.
I mean, part of good communication is recognizing your own patterns. And we did talk about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was last week or the week before. It might have been last week, about destructive communication patterns. And I've
Mhm.
noticed myself that I'm falling a bit prey to halting, or halta, or whatever. So hungry, angry, lonely, tired,
Horny.
horny, halto, overwhelmed has been
Mhm.
mine. And I've
Mhm.
been journaling lately
Mhm.
that I've noticed, and I don't like that I'm allowing myself to get overwhelmed, and then how it's impacting our relationship.
Okay. So I appreciate that you've made that observation, and it's wonderful. But isn't it fantastic how it all kind of stems from the idea of our being communicative, right? We are
Mhm.
self-reflective. We look at what's going on, and we're able to communicate that not only with our partners, but with ourselves, that we can make that dialogue with ourselves. We
Mhm.
become more aware.
Mhm.
And it's all through the awareness is all gained through communication, that
Yeah.
we have the communications with others and with ourselves. So I think it's wonderful that you're able to recognize that and use that information to perhaps inform yourself what might happen next time you feel as though you're halting, and how might you be well informed for yourself, but communicate that with others, as you did last time. And you told me you're halting. I was like, okay, I'll ease off my communications. I'll modify how I might approach, and it worked well. So it's good.
Exactly. So, because I think when people are navigating what can sometimes be pretty rough waters when opening up a relationship, some of the common worries people have are like, what do I need to know? How do I decide what's right for us? Will I be jealous? And what will I do if I am?
Mhm.
What can I do to protect the relationship and open up in a way that feels safe and secure? And
Mhm.
how can I avoid making big mistakes that will harm the relationship?
Right.
And you can come back from some of these things, and we certainly helped people do that.
Mhm.
But you want to try to avoid them and open up the lines of dialogue, as we said.
Right. Yeah, there's always value in making mistakes, right? But if you can avoid them, that's pretty cool too. There's nothing saying that you have to make mistakes to learn from it. We can read about certain things, participate in certain things to find out and be informed, so we can maybe resist the temptation to have to make those mistakes.
So are any of these your worries, things that you're wondering about? We'd love to know in the chat.
Mhm.
So let's jump in.
All right, let's do it.
So these are the common questions people have. So it's why we put together these 7 must-haves, which are also known as our Securely Polyamorous Framework, which is in our program. So we'll list them out briefly, and then maybe we'll chat about each of them.
Sure.
So the first one's attunement communication, which I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah,
we already
that sounds
started
good.
a bit about communication, but we're going to talk a bit more.
But about the attunement part, right? We didn't really mention that, but
Yeah.
we'll go into
So
it.
attunement communication,
Building secure attachment,
overcoming jealousy,
relationship blueprints. That's interesting.
creating a relationship
Yeah.
blueprint. Yeah. Personal boundaries and your values-based agreement, as opposed to rules.
And building connection and deepening those connections.
And then finally, where we started, which was relationship reviews and check-ins via radar.
Right.
So we did talk quite a bit about communication right now, but I think just a few minutes ago. But the first thing you want to figure out for yourself and in your relationship is, how do we communicate? So are we engaging in destructive or effective communication patterns?
Right. And are we able to really, make a distinction between the two? Are we able to recognize what is healthy, productive communication, what's going to lead to progressive communication? And are we able to identify what is less healthy, what is, in fact, possibly destructive communication? Because that's important.
It's very important.
It sure is.
The other thing that's important is how you feel in communicating. Do I feel that there's a safe space? Can I create a safe space with my partner in order to have open and honest dialogue where I can feel like I'm heard and understood?
Right.
So that's the big part. And I think that's where the attunement communication method comes in that we teach in the program. It's the exact thing that's in module 1 of the program, because it's so important. So we teach it at the beginning, and then you practice it, because that idea of being heard and understood is the big part, I think.
It sure is. Yeah. Because, if I feel as though, okay, we're going to sit down and have this little discussion, this talk, this conversation, and I feel as though everything I'm saying is, going in the ether, it's not being heard or absorbed, then it's really not that valuable, is it? We've spent some time, but we're not listening to each other. We're simply speaking to be heard, but not really attuned to what the other person is saying.
Yeah, hence the name, attunement communication.
For sure,
method.
exactly. But also to that point, it reminds me of something that we often say is that how would we want to hear it, right? So I'm heated, I'm angered, and I want to just discharge all that information, and I might even throw in some name calling or whatever it is. How would I feel if I were to receive the message that I'm sending out? So maybe we can be mindful of that as well, right? So maybe the points I have are good and need to be expressed, but how is it being delivered? So we might have some consideration for how it's going to land.
Yeah. And I think when you don't feel heard or understood, or there's things that you feel remain unsaid, then you don't get to that level of progressive communication, and you end up going in this circling spiral, which I feel like that's the main thing that people struggle with. And I think that if you can get through that part, it makes all the rest of the parts, which are just as essential, easier to do. And actually you can do them.
Yeah. But it's easy to understand in a way. If you look at why do we keep saying the same thing over and over again? Some people might even say, why are they nagging? They're always saying the same thing over and over again. I heard it. But maybe the person sending that message is nagging or saying the same thing over and over because they're not being heard. They're not feeling as though what they're offering in the communication is not really being acknowledged or absorbed. And that way they feel as though they have to continue going over and over it again, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think what we could do then is, if I feel that I'm saying the same thing over and over again and it's not landing well, then maybe it is either, and often it's two parts, right? It's how am I putting it across? Maybe it's so convoluted that it makes it difficult to understand, which I think I can sometimes do. And also, is the other person really being present and listening, right?
Exactly. So the second one we talked about is building secure attachment. So this is a huge part. So once you can start working through the communication, you also need to understand what your attachment style is and how it's impacting your relationships. So if you don't know your attachment style, it's a good time to go and figure that out.
Sure.
And actually on today's worksheet, there's a link to the quiz to get an understanding of where you might be starting. Yeah.
That's interesting. You say where you might be starting, because I think when we first started doing this, I know that my attachment style, my level of comfort was at a certain place. And when I look back at it now, it has definitely shifted. So what's interesting is if you've not done the attachment, or if you have done it in the past and you are able to look at what your attachment styles might be, you might even come up with one of the tests, several of the tests might give you a percentage. It'll tell you you're 46% securely attached, 17% anxious, and so on. If you look at it when you're first starting and then you look at it later on, you may see a shift, and you might be able to recognize that there's a possibility for growth there, and you might actually see it in a numerical value. It's quite interesting. But really, it's the idea that you might come from a certain place, and it doesn't mean that that's where you're always going to have to be. If you do this program, if you do this type of work, you can actually grow your attachment style. You can actually grow the level of security that you feel, not so much only with the relationship, but within yourself, which is most important. So there are ways.
And I think, I thought I lost it.
It'll come back.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So a part of, I think I know what it was. The reason
I told you it'd come back.
The reason attachment is important, though, especially in non-consensual non-monogamy, is because you sort of lose. Sometimes people, even if they have like one of the insecure attachment styles, so anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, when they're in a relationship with someone, say they're married or nesting, and then it's monogamous, it can feel secure because of the structure of the relationship. But what happens when you decide to open it up to consensual non-monogamy, to others, having others in your relationship, you sort of lose that piece, the structure being one of the elements of making it secure. So you have to sort of work on all the other elements that make it feel good and secure. That's why the communication piece is important, and, building security in self. I think those are, that's why we talk about attachment and consensual non-monogamy, where you might not even really talk about it in monogamous relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't recall ever having that kind of conversation, right? We built this whole lexicon now that we are in this type of open relationship. We are needing to look at these things. Whereas before, we might have had a convention in the monogamous relationship, being married, that said, well, we're forsaking all others. So that very idea right there says, well, there's going to be no outside influence. You're just going to be safe between the two of us. Unfortunately, that doesn't always tend to work out, right? There are many marriages end in divorce, even though they have this kind of provision that's going to kind of create this illusion of security. Whereas when we open up a relationship, we're saying, well, you're free to go out and be about anytime you want and do anything you want. And should you come back to me in this relationship, it's of your choosing, and not because there's any kind of legislation, mandate, or provision or fantasy that you're going to be protected otherwise. So it seems scary at first, but when your partner does come back, doesn't it then act as a testament? Well, they're coming of their own free volition. They're coming because they want to be, and not because they feel as though they're beholden to this agreement.
Yeah. That's when your beliefs come into play, right? What do I want to believe about this? Instead of believing that it's insecure because there's not this same level of contractedness, I can choose to believe that actually it's even more secure because my partner's choosing me all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a leap of faith for people when they first start opening up. Like, are they really going to come back? But even in a marriage, we don't really know if the person's ever going to come back. They might say they're leaving for work and then just never come back. Or they may come back and say, look, I'm done with the marriage. So having that in itself is not the guarantee. It's not really putting the relationship in the vault where it'll never, be altered, changed, or any otherwise. Right. Yeah. So we're opening ourselves up, but it's on the basis of having done a lot of this work, communicating and knowing that we're creating the secure attachment, not the model that we're going into as though that's going to create the secure attachment.
So that's module 2 in our program. But what I wanted to say too, because we talked about this before, we put together this program, which has like 7 must-haves. It's got 8 modules in total. Anyways, but the interesting thing is we realized is that while it was specifically designed for people who are deciding to open up into consensual non-monogamy or already non-monogamous, it actually, the same elements would be amazing for all relationships.
Oh, for sure.
It's the 7 same essentials. It's got a little bit of flavor of that. So if you're watching this and this is something that you're like, I'm not sure I could only do that program, or I can only do these things if I want to be consensual non-monogamy. I think that's consensual non-monogamous. I think that's not true. You could still do it and decide what you want coming out of it. And you could decide that you want to still be monogamous, or maybe your partner wants to be non-monogamous and you want to be monogamous. It doesn't, does not have a specific end. We're not trying to, it's not a religion or a cult. We're not trying to convert people to non-monogamy.
No, and absolutely. And, it's happened before that people might have started to open up a relationship and then decide, well, it's just not for us. And we want to go back to our other way. They want to go to monogamy, and that's fine. But as you say, a lot of these components that are in this program would benefit anyone. I mean, even being in a marriage, a closed relationship, that's not to say that you're never going to feel jealousy, right? So one of the components, the next one, number 3, is talking about jealousy, right? So whether you're open or closed, that is not what's determining your level of jealousy. It's how you feel about yourself in the world, your level of attachment, secure attachment, and self-esteem, and other factors.
So the goal we say overcoming jealousy as a must-have. I think it's hard to you don't have to completely overcome jealousy, but I think you want to get to a place where you have a goal of feeling good and you can manage your emotions, but also, if you would like, you can move towards compersion. Compersion being
our fulfillment, our enjoyment of seeing our partner have enjoyment, right? But absolutely, it's not a must. That's not a mark or certificate at the end. Well, now you have compersion as though you've won or succeeded. We may simply right size the amount of jealousy
Mhm.
and maybe never feel a compersion. That's okay too. But we want to get jealousy to a point where we don't feel as though it is this big monster that beats us about, that we have mastery over it and we can really recognize what is at play, what's triggering, what is making me feel this way, and how might I be less affected by it? How might I become empowered and
Mhm.
not feel as though I'm prone to jealousy?
Sometimes it's a myth of polyamory that you must have compersion. And I think,
Mm.
you know, even our own clients were talking to us last week about how they feel like they're not good at polyamory if they don't have complete compersion. Like they want to be
Right.
their partner's cheerleader. They want to be super excited and happy for them, but they're kind of like happy for them, but not like rah rah
Mm.
sis boomba,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that's fine. Like it, and
Mm.
that's another belief to work on, is that I don't have to have complete compersion to be successful in non-monogamy. I do need to understand the roots of my jealousy
Yeah.
and feelings of insecurity, and if it is having a negative impact on me
Right.
or my relationship.
Yeah.
And then working through the steps to find ways to manage or overcome these things, which is like, we have specific activities in the program to help you do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how has the jealousy manifested itself previously in the past, and what would be, much more acceptable? What would be a better way of having this issue of jealousy put to rest?
Yeah. So that's a big one too. I think jealousy is one of the most common things people say
Yeah.
is most difficult to navigate in non-monogamy.
But even in monogamy as well, right?
True,
There's a
yeah,
lot of
true.
people who are in this wedding model, in this marriage model, and they still feel jealous.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it's not module 1, even though people will always say that jealousy is the most
Right.
important thing. It's module 3 in the program
Right.
because it's so important to work on that communication
For
first,
sure.
and then understand your attachment and
Yeah.
what's causing your feelings of insecurity, and then moving into understanding specifically what's behind jealousy, your
Yeah.
jealousy, and how you can move towards feeling more secure and more towards compersion.
Yeah, well, it's built in a logical sequence, right? So yeah, we have to be able to communicate with ourselves and then with others first, and then find out what is at play, and then go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So once you work through these 3 big things, well, you're working through communication the whole time. The 4th must have is a relationship blueprint.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we call
Okay.
it a blueprint because I feel like it's like an action plan. This is where I want my relationship to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. And this is, I think this is the fun part. This is the part where you get to talk about what it is you're excited about, get clarity on what you want first and what your partner wants. So we actually do an activity where you sort of work on thinking about what it is that you want. What sorts of things do you want out of non-monogamy? What would get you excited? What are you not excited about? And that sort of thing. And then basically we go through the various types of styles out there. And then you then can start from that and create a blueprint with a specific plan on how to get there.
Right.
I think that's an exciting part.
It is exciting. Yeah. And as you said, right, we can identify the things we're wanting, and also things that we're not wanting, right? That we might not be finding so fantastic. But that also kind of ties into the next part, and that is our value-based agreement.
Yes. So now you have a clear picture of what it is that you want. So how are you going to get there and do it in a way that feels safe and secure? And this is such a big step. This that takes up two modules in our program. Because first, the thing you need to understand is, well, if this is what I want, do I have any personal boundaries that I need to be clear on? Because we did a whole training on this in the group as well, but there's an even bigger one in the program about understanding and establishing your personal boundaries and then communicating them. That's the important part.
For sure. But it's so interesting, that part about our personal boundaries. We might start off, I think that I'll speak for myself. I started off thinking that I already knew all of them, and that everybody must know what my boundaries are somehow magically, that you would know that I wouldn't want this or the other thing. And yet, once we started doing the work, I came to discover, well, I had no idea that there were all these elements that were fairly important to me. And I certainly, if I hadn't become aware of them, how could I have communicated them to others? So we explore that, we gather that data, and then we communicate it.
Yeah,
we share that.
I think sometimes, and the thing we talk about too in the module is about this idea of rules, boundaries, and agreements, because they are different things. And I think the rules part is often what people do in terms of setting up things that they think like are going to make them feel secure, which don't in fact work. And then there's this confusion about, well, these are our boundaries. No, boundaries are personal to you.
Right.
They're sort of the things that protect yourself from the outside world and the actions of others. And they express what you want or don't want. Whereas what we talk about we want you to work towards is first understanding your personal boundaries, and then what you value personally and what you value in your relationship. And then from that, we teach you our model of creating a values-based relationship agreement, which is a great model and is more like creating an agreement around your values, like what you want rather than what you don't want, is always a better frame and has much higher level of success.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of like the reward consequence model, right? So would you rather be invited with the potential for the benefits, or do you respond better to the consequence? And we're wanting to create positions of love, right? So we're saying, well, these are the things that I want, and this would make me happy, and we allow for that. But it's interesting speaking about the idea of rules and security and attachment and jealousy and all those things. So very often, rules are put in place to protect us, and there are certain things that we are, very determined about. And there are other times when we enact rules that we have this belief system that, well, if I have this kind of rule, then I won't feel this other way. If I have this kind of rule, it's going to make me feel or not feel this thing. And they're not always so accurate or true, actually, because we have this thing in place, and yet we find out that it's not as effective. So we want to kind of look at what is the purpose, what's the motivation in creating this type of rule, and what do I imagine it's going to do, and what would happen if it's not there? How could I still feel protected and stuff? So it's interesting to look at, what are the agreements, what are boundaries, and what are our rules.
And if you have a rule that you've set up, I like how you say about how you figuring out why you've put it in place, and from that you can figure out what is it I'm valuing, what is it I'm wanting, and then you can shift that into more of agreement rather than a rule. So I'm seeing a comment in the discussion here about someone who's a partner who's not telling them in advance about dates and stuff. So things like that, about letting people know, letting your partner know as soon as possible, I would say would be a good part of a good relationship agreement. So I know that we have in our relationship agreement that we consideration as a value. So we value consideration in our agreement. And part of consideration is letting our partner know as soon as we make plans. We don't ask for permission. We might ask if we're unsure about schedule or something like that, or if we're trying to navigate, we're staying in one place and we need to navigate sharing the space with a date, then we might talk about schedule and that sort of thing. But that's part of our agreement. And so that might be something important for you to talk to your partner about.
Yeah, for sure. It's maybe not so much a rule that we have to tell the other person, but as you said, it's a consideration, right? So how would I feel if you were to just make this date and then I didn't know about it or thought something was going on? So I would prefer that you communicate with me, that communication, that consideration, and I do the same for you. That's all.
Well, just like the person saying in the comments, it's like they want to know so that they can make other plans if they wish to. Like I like to know, and then I go, oh, okay, well, I'll take that time and go do this, or use it as an opportunity, right? But if you don't know, you can't do that. And so I can see how that might cause a bit of a rift in the relationship.
So then my question would be, what is it that makes it difficult for their partner to not communicate this thing? Do they feel uncomfortable announcing that they're having a date? Do they imagine that their partner is going to feel distant anyway? So, what is at play that's making this model of communication not as successful or viable as it could be? And that's something to look at. So
like one of the couples we worked with, they were talking about how the one person would, like, they were always scared about telling their partner about a date because they were worried that, they would get upset or that sort of thing. In fact, what was happening was they were letting them know later and then downplaying it. And then that made them question whether or not they were being authentic and honest and all that stuff. So it actually, the not telling, even though you might find out early and go like fret for a few days, it's better than the result, I think, of then feeling like you can't trust them, they're not being honest and that sort of thing.
But it might have actually been an indication of their attachment style, their level, right? So if they felt anxious, then making that kind of announcement might only trigger their anxiety, right? Whereas when they feel more secure, then it's easier for them to say, well, I have a date this other day and, we'll be okay. I know we'll be okay.
I like this comment from Alicia. Said they hid it from me not to hurt my feelings, but it hurt worse to find out later when they weren't telling the truth.
Sure. Goes back to communication.
Okay. All right. So number 6 is building connection. So I think the important part is when you're opening a relationship, you want to continue to build and maintain, even strengthen and grow your connection with your partner. If you have a partner who you're in a long-term relationship with or a committed relationship, and you want to maintain the stability of that, I think it's important also to create quality time and figure out ways of building that connection. So that's something we talk about. We talk about how we might do dating, what we might do to maintain the connection between us, increase our desire, continue to have fun. These are super important parts because I think what commonly happens is that people will open a relationship, they'll start dating other people, and then they're having all these fun dates that they're planning with someone else. And then your other partner feels like, oh, well, what about me? Aren't I worth fun dates like that? So it's really important for, the long-term longevity of your open relationship to maintain that connection and build it, in fact.
Yeah. And it needn't be a grand gesture either, right? Although those are nice too. But I mean, we can reconnect, we can do the connection and then reconnect very quickly. In fact, we just reconnected a moment ago in the kitchen, right? Where we were kind of, I think, maybe both feeling a little disconnected, whatever. And when we do the heart and hand thing, and yeah, so
should we do it?
Yeah, let's do it. So we invite each other to look in each other's gaze, and we take our hands, my right hand, your right hand, and then we put each other's left hand over each other's heart, and we will simply look at each other for a moment or two, feeling as though we're reconnecting. Yeah, so so it's little gestures like that. It might seem obvious, it might seem rather rudimentary, but at the same time, they are things that very often might fall by the wayside. And just taking that little pause says to the other person, I see you, I'm still here, I'm present. And it's connect, and it's so vitally important, right? Because as you say, when we open up the relationship, there may be a lot of new relationship energy coming in. There's a whole bunch of different factors. Our calendar may become saturated with offerings and dates and opportunities. Where am I going to feel when all that's unfolding? So we learn to connect in these ways, and we also learn to communicate. Hey, I need this type of connection right now. Can you pause for a moment and help me feel as though I am seen and appreciated?
Because I think when you feel that disconnect in your relationship, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about the relationship, right? You're seeing them very excited about other things, and it starts to put ideas in your head about your relationship. So I think it's important to remind each other. And one of the things that we teach our clients to do at the beginning as well is we do an affirmation, and we make them do it on the coaching call. But many of them actually have incorporated into their practice every day. They take a moment to affirm and thank each other for being there and working on the relationship, and being important and being there for them. And I think that's awesome. We have a little, based on the ho'oponopono. I can never say that word.
But gratitude is such a wonderful thing though, isn't it? I mean, you can always find something to be grateful for and share with your partner. So that's awesome.
So last but not least, number 7, relationship reviews and check-ins. So now I'm curious, in the comments, reply yes or no if you actually do official check-ins or relationship reviews. What we actually teach in the program, we actually just did this a couple of weeks ago, is the radar, which stands for review. It's based on the Polyamory. They do radar. We've added an extra A in there. Review, agenda. The extra A is affirm and connect, like we just told you. Discussion, action plan, and reconnect. And I mean, we go into more detail in the program, but the thing that's important about this is, you can have a standing agenda. You can have smaller check-ins more frequently, and then more of a quarterly one that covers more ground. And I think the important part of this is to have those check-ins even when things are great, because that might be an opportunity to reopen that blueprint to say, hey, is there anything different we want to build or add on to our relationship? So that's opportunities to discuss not only things that are hard or difficult and that you're struggling with, but also exciting and new things you might want to open up and change, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, in the beginning, the idea of it seemed rather contrived. It was like, okay, this is funky exercise. Let's try it and we'll see what happens. And it went okay, but then we repeated it and we kept doing it over the course of our many, many, many years together. And it seems much more fluid now. It's almost like the idea of bringing up STI testing, right? STD testing. In the beginning, when I would go on a date and I'd bring that up, I felt very awkward about bringing up the idea of STI testing. Are they going to think I'm just as pervert or what? Who knows what they're going to think? I had a whole bunch of fantasies, but the more I went to it, the easier it got. And now I just say it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. And the same for these check-ins. So in the beginning, it might seem strange to kind of have like this formal announcement, or maybe it's more casual, but it's uncommon in the beginning. But as we practice it, it becomes much more common, and it's easier to announce it and say, I think the relationship is going really well. However, there is this one point that I would like to bring up, and this is that invitation, is that opportunity to do that. Because if we don't implement this, then when might I? If I'm not so familiar with it, if I'm not so comfortable with that, when am I going to bring it up? How am I going to bring it up? What's it going to be like?
I think what's good about it is, we're not saying that you don't have conversations as things are happening, but especially at the beginning, if you're opening up, maybe you have a small time every week where you have a check-in. So it gives you a place and time where you can have a quiet moment together to talk about things, and you don't have to talk about it all the time. Because I think that's the problem that people face, is that they feel like this whole discussion about their relationship fills the room and is part of it sucks up all the enjoyment in it. And they're like, why the hell am I doing this? This is too hard. But if you have a time where you feel like, okay, you've eaten, you're not halting, so you're eating, you're rested, you're free from the kids, if you have kids, you know what I mean? It's a good time to have a discussion. Then you can bring those things to that discussion and not have to talk about it every single second of every single day.
Yeah. And that to that point, if we feel as though we're always talking about the same thing, it's because we are not actually progressing the communication, right? We're not actually getting to that issue. So if we are able to address it, identify it, address it, and then make the necessary adjustments, it will become a non-issue. We will be able to move past that. So don't give up hope. It's not always going to be just hard work and turmoil. Identify what's going on, find how we're able to address that, and then we can come to the promised land. Here we are.
Yeah. And I think what's amazing is you'd be surprised how quickly you can get to that point, right? Our program is 16 weeks. We work with people over those 16 weeks, and it's an amazing transformation that can happen in that short period of time. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like a short period of time, but some people struggle with things for years and years. They're like, we've been trying to open up for 2 years, but we can't get past the fill in the blanks sort of thing. And it's amazing to see the difference. And you'd be surprised. And I'm, surprised that people are open to more things by the end than they might have been at the beginning, because they feel like they can actually talk to their partner. They don't feel like they have to hide things. They don't feel, it's just, I don't know. I get it. I'm geeking out because I know it's our program, but it's like, I think it's so great.
They're open to more things perhaps, but if they decide that they're not, they at least know that they are well informed, that they are aware of their motive in deciding one way or the other. And that is paramount, right? So that we're not just being led by circumstance. We determine where we're going with this. We are empowered by it. We decide.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. So I'm curious if any of you have a relationship review or check-in, and what would be an essential topic for you on your radar?
Cool.
Yeah. So to sum up, we'll just repeat them really quickly. The 7 must-haves. So attunement, communication,
building secure attachment,
overcoming jealousy,
the relationship blueprint,
personal boundaries, and establishing your values-based agreement using our model,
and building connection.
And finally, relationship reviews and check-ins via radar.
Cool.
So that was a lot.
Yeah.
So
it's always a lot.
It is a lot. And you can definitely, DIY this yourself, but if you do want the step-by-step plan to take you through all of this, that's all included in our Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery program. And we're starting the next cohort this month. And so if you want to get in, book a call with us and we'll talk about your personal circumstances and we can talk about if it's a fit for you. So you can book a relationship rescue call with me. And yeah, we'll make sure we talk about what's going on in your relationship and where you want to make changes. And if the program's a fit for you or if there's something else, then we'll make sure you leave with an action plan of next steps.
Cool.
Yeah, they're really great calls. I love doing them. So please don't hesitate booking one. And finally, the worksheet secret word is, well, our program's called Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery. So it's mastery. So drop that here in the comments. If I don't get it to you right away, then please feel free to send me a DM. And thanks everyone for joining us. Let us know how you like this. Thumbs up. Fires, would love to see those in the chat. And thanks and have a great Monday.
Thank you.